Hi, so my name's Andrew McFetrich. I'm a talent acquisition partner at Sage. So for those who don't know Sage, we're the UK's largest software company. We're the only software company in the FTSE 100. And in terms of our product engineering teams, our technical teams, we've got about 2,500 people globally and about 650 based across the UK and Ireland. So it keeps us busy in terms of trying to hire people in a very competitive marketplace. In the tech scene in the UK, so in terms of the marketplace that we're actually trying to hire from at the moment, there's never been a better time to be a candidate in the tech industry at the moment. There's more jobs available than there's ever been before. I saw a report earlier this week that said in the Northeast where we're based, there's 3,300 jobs advertised at the moment in tech, 97% of which require some sort of qualification as an entry level. I've not seen the figure for Manchester, but I'd imagine that's a little bit higher down here. The salaries are accelerating. The last 2 to 3 years, salaries keep going up. They're in demand. There's a shortage of candidates, and obviously that drives the salaries upwards. And there's more opportunities. So there's more startups, there's more scale-ups, there's remote working options. Developers, testers, etc. Can work for a company in California and New York from Manchester and work remotely. And like I said, the candidates know they're in demand. They're not necessarily going to be applying to the adverts that you write. They know that they're going to get opportunities. Like any other industry, when they're in demand, a lot of recruiters are contacting them, and they can cherry pick the best opportunities. So what we've found works is to really sort of nail your proposition and to really sort of understand that when you're entering a busy marketplace, you need to know what it is you're offering, as well as what your competitors are offering. So in order to get that right, you need to know what your audience wants to hear. And what we do is we ask ourselves, we ask our tech teams, the stuff that we're doing, does this appeal to you? You've got a huge amount of knowledge if you've already got a tech team there, and find out if you're hitting the mark. So what do developers want? Well, there's a really good piece of research done by Stack Overflow. They called it the Developer Hiring Landscape Report. And it sort of broke down what developers tend to look for when they're looking for new opportunities. So typically, professional development, they want to be able to progress their careers. There's quite a linear path for developers. They can move into team leadership and lead great big technology teams. They could go down the architecture route, where they actually start to define what that landscape looks like from a tech perspective. Comp and Ben's probably the same as most industries. They want to make sure they're paid well and that they get good benefits. And most importantly is the tech. So technology obviously moves very, very fast, very quickly. And developers typically want to be able to work with new technology. They don't want to be working with something that was even 3 or 4 years old. They want to be working on the cutting edge stuff, developing new products and new tools in that sort of technology. Office location and flexibility is key, but I think flexibility, I mentioned remote working. So again, do you let your engineers, your developers work from home? And if you do, you can actually open up that talent pool and start hiring from a wider landscape. In the office environment and the teammates, which I'll come back to shortly. So we talk about playing to our strengths. If you don't tick all of these boxes, what do you tick? What can you really accentuate when you're talking to candidates, both in your adverts and when you're engaging with them over the phone or face-to-face? It's important that what we've found when we've made a lot of hires in certain areas is to get the whole hiring teams on board. So it's a team effort, and you need to make sure that you agree and that you're aligned in terms of what you're actually looking for, and that everyone who's involved in that process, every hiring manager, everyone who's going to be involved in making that decision, knows what you're trying to recruit. That might sound fairly basic, but there's so much technology that people need and that they've got experience of doing. You need to make sure that you all understand that you're trying to hire a developer with skills X, Y, and Z. That when you're trying to recruit, it's important that you start looking at making a decision as quickly as possible, and you're not sort of trying to find someone for 6 months' time for that next project that's around the corner, and how you're trying to recruit. So everyone's aware of the different methods that you're trying to use to get people on board. When you're looking at what you're trying to recruit, it's important to think that what you're asking for, is it realistic? So developers are very often self-taught. There's a lot of people with computer science degrees, but is it actually essential for the job? So if you've got a hiring manager saying they don't want to hire someone because they haven't got a degree, why? Is that important? I think 90% of developers are self-taught to a certain degree, whether they've got a degree or not. They still brush up their own skills in their own time. So 80% of the effort we find, the more effort that you put in up front before the advert's even published, gives you better and stronger results as the campaign progresses. So in terms of the routes to market and how you can find developers, and I'm mainly talking about software developers, but it applies to everyone in the industry, testers, etc. But what we found works well is meetups. So the sort of stereotype developer being an introvert, sitting in a room on his own, doesn't always ring true. They can actually be quite social beasts. They do like to go to meetups to talk about the tech that they're working on, how they've solved problems, and sharing this with people in their industry. So we found attending these, sponsoring them, and by sponsoring them, it's very often a small amount of money, and it's putting some money behind the bar or buying some pizzas for them. But you get your brand in front of them, and they know that you're in that marketplace and you're potentially looking to bring people on board. Referrals. One of the things that I found most peculiar about referrals is that it's really important to ask the question, even though everyone might be bought into what you're trying to do, unless you specifically ask, do you know someone who can do this job? You don't always get that referral. So it's important, if you have a referral policy in place, if there's a reward, that you bring that to the front. But also that you're just asking people, everyone involved, who else do you know that might be able to do this job? Obviously, advertising is going to be a part of it, and I go back to the previous slide, be clear about what you're offering. So if you need someone with X, Y, and Z, make sure you call that out. Again, they're very specific in terms of what they're looking for. And social media is obviously important. Yeah, it's a good idea. You can amplify your message on social media in ways that you haven't been able to do previously, but it's worth bearing in mind, 22% of developers don't even have a LinkedIn profile. So if you're just using LinkedIn, you're going to be cutting yourself short in terms of finding tech talent. And 11% of developers actually hate being contacted on LinkedIn. I don't really know what they're doing on LinkedIn, but they hate it, so no. And make direct approaches, but do be careful when you're making direct approaches to candidates. They're very technical, they know what they're talking about, and they do get snarky on the internet when you get it wrong, and they will take the piss out of you, basically, online. So when you're trying to position yourself, one of the challenges that a lot of technology recruiters have is you're not technical. You don't understand the technology as well as they do, and there's a fear that you're going to look stupid. So I think it's important that you try and, that you understand what you do talk about and that you don't overstretch what you don't know. So often recruiters will say to developers things like, we have a great startup culture. I've been guilty of this myself. I work for, as I said before, a FTSE 100 company, tried to describe it as a startup culture, and what they heard is that there's long hours and low pay. So it doesn't necessarily ring true to what you're trying to get across. You can talk about your office environment and tell them that you've got a ping pong table and a beer fridge, and what they hear is that the tech sucks. That's all you've got in the locker. And recruiters say we work hard, we play hard. The oldest cliche in the book, isn't it? And what developers tend to hear is, we have an average age of 22, we might be alcoholics. So that might be true. If it is, lead with it. So do try and explain the tech, but be aware of the limitations. Be aware of the things that you don't know. Java and JavaScript are very different things, and developers will mock you for getting them wrong and make you feel very stupid. Personal experience there. So when you're talking about going to market, it's important to think about how you talk about these people and how you talk about the job families that you're trying to recruit for. And people identify in different ways. So again, I'm talking predominantly about things like developers. So you could have a software developer. There are software engineers. If you're talking about Boolean searches on LinkedIn or other job boards, these are all different ways of being able to identify them. Programmers are a little bit more old-fashioned these days, but there are still people with that on their job title. And then the whole thing that we always see, ninjas, rock stars, all this sort of stuff. But something to be aware of when you are looking at these sort of things, the guy on the left is Tim Berners-Lee, the person who created the World Wide Web and identifies as a web developer. And the chap on the other side, David Shing, calls himself a self-proclaimed thought leader and digital prophet. So bear in mind that these people identify in different ways. When you're assessing candidates, so you've done the hard work, you've found candidates, you've got them through and coming into the office, and the assessment part can be just as difficult as actually finding the candidates. And there's some things that you can do to sort of maximize your success when you are putting candidates through the assessment. Keep it real. So when you're talking about this, don't lock them in a room and ask them to produce code on a whiteboard, because that's not how they do it in the real world. In the real world, they're going to Google it. They're going to ask their colleague. That's OK. So put them in an environment where they can take the test home, produce it, bring it back into the office. You can discuss it with them. You can find out their thought process behind it. And it's much more genuine and authentic to what they're going to be doing if they're successful in the job. Be thorough. So again, if you decline a candidate, you're basically saying to them you don't think they're good enough, that their coding skills aren't good enough. So you need to give them a good opportunity to be able to present themselves. We did a big campaign down in Manchester a few years ago, and it was a 3-hour interview. It was one stage, but it was 3 hours. And the candidate feedback we got was really positive. People were saying, I felt like I had a chance to show you what I could do, and I feel you've got enough information to make a decision on me, however that might go. And give feedback. So again, if you're saying to them, we don't think you're right for the job, it's important to sort of explain why. If it's about the code, you can, potentially tell them where you felt they went wrong, and what courses are available, different coaching, different training courses available to them. And show them the workspace. I mentioned before that it's something that they do like to know about. Are they going to be working in some sort of grotty tech, in some corner office with no natural light, or have you got something nice? We always try and give them a tour of the building so they can see actually where they're going to be working and what that environment's like, brings it to life for them. And be flexible. So obviously people aren't always available to interview at 11 o'clock in the morning. Developers can work remotely, but give them enough time to prepare. Interviewing, we do a lot of interviews 6 o'clock at night to make sure that actually people can finish their day jobs and then come along to an interview. It goes back to what I talked about before, to make sure that people are ready for that the hiring managers know that they're going to have to put a bit of time aside to do their interviews. And of course, make a decision. The number of times I used to hear hiring managers say, really good candidate, really strong, they've got X, Y, and Z, but let's just see what else comes up before we make a decision. We're talking about hiring in a competitive marketplace, make a decision. If they're good and you think they can work with them, make the decision and hire them. You can automate a lot of this as well. So one of the things that we've done is, I mentioned sort of whiteboard exercise earlier. There are online tools you can use whereby you can automate and actually make sure that you've got the same assessment being used in every office or every country, however you're set up. But therefore you can get a benchmark. So people who perform well, you can compare them directly with candidates and even existing colleagues as well. A bad hire can obviously cost the company, we all know stats like this, up to 30% of the candidate's salary. So if you get it wrong, it's going to be a problem. So in terms of how you actually get that competitive edge, there's no golden bullet as there isn't with any other industry. It's about being thorough, making sure that you put the work in up front, that you get the advert right, that you get the spec right, you know exactly what you're looking for, and that you spend that time with the front end. I've always found that gives you a much bigger advantage of success, chances of success. And it's about the team effort, so the hiring managers, the recruiters, everyone who's involved in that has a part to play. I'm sure everyone, as recruiters in the room, have had hiring managers say, the reason we can't recruit is because of recruitment. But it is a team effort. The hiring managers need to get out there, they're going to the meetups, they know what's happening in the industry. They can help and work hand in hand with you about it. And iterate, if you are getting it wrong, don't stick to your guns. If they're saying something isn't working, you're not getting the candidates through, or the assessment pieces you're getting bad feedback on, don't be afraid to change it up. And obviously it takes a bit of resilience as a recruiter. You've got to be open to that feedback. You might think, we ran an advert a couple of years ago, which I thought was brilliant. It was actually written in code, it was in Java, and it said, to someone who could read it, apply for this job, et cetera, and the whole business thought it stank. I thought it was brilliant, but we had to bin it. We didn't get the candidates through, so we had some honest conversations, or they had honest conversations with me. And build your bench strength. So one of the things that we've done recently is a graduate program. So these are, as I keep saying, they're difficult to find, they're difficult to attract to the business. You can sort of grow your own talent, apprentices and grads, and there is a graduate apprenticeship scheme now, so actually they become degree qualified. They have a day release at university, and they come out with a computer science degree at the end of that as well. So building the bench strength helps that pipeline come through, and it takes a bit of the pressure off when you're actually trying to hire the talent. So that is the competitive edge, and one cheesy quote to end with, 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. If you have that inspiration, you find something brilliant that works, that's great, but typically in my experience, it's about hard work to get there. So that's that.